Hey YouTube, Dosm Rider here. So this is going to be the start of a new video series on my channel, sort of in the same line of my episode reviews and the Dosm's Rambles videos on things, and the top 5s. It's kind of a spin-off of the top 5s. So the way this video is going to work is the very beginning, hopefully short part of it will just be me explaining what the series will be, sort of talking about what's going to be happening next. And then the second half is going to kind of be an overall thoughts on Power Rangers versus Super Sentai, because that's what the video says, on my preferences and stuff, and sort of give you a rough idea of some of the things I'll be talking about from here on. Anyway, so this idea started, I got a comment on one of my top 5 videos when I was asking about, you know, I have a bunch of categories in mind for my next categories for top 5, what should I do next? And someone said, why don't you do like top 5 PR series that are better than Sentai, or vice versa. And I thought that was really interesting, and definitely a video, and this video series will likely get a ton of like random hate comments of purists on either side of the fence. But I thought it was very interesting, and like the more I thought about it, it was kind of an interesting one to think about a top 5 for, because it's kind of something interesting to talk about, and it's weird that I would want to do this video series because I usually hate like, oh, this is better than the other, but that's why I thought it would be interesting to do as a different series, because I kind of want to talk about similarities and differences in each series, and then I'll say what my personal favorite of the two is. It could be a tie, it could be significantly higher opinion of one over the other, it could be really close, and so it's much more of a subjective thing, especially in certain series. It gets all around it is subjective, but so I just thought it would be more interesting to do it individually. So I'm going to start with, the first video after this will be MMPR Season 1 versus Zyuranger, and I'll sort of talk about the similarities and differences, and then I'd like to get some feedback from you guys. I'm going to sort of do a rough like version for that first episode, and just let me know what you'd like to see more of in terms of, do you want me to compare the characters more, certain episode examples if I can remember them, plot details, and all. That's kind of what I'll be doing. I'll be talking about, well, this is what they did the same, this is what they did different, this is what I like that they changed, and stuff like that. Changed being kind of weird because it's not supposed to be the same show, but you know what I mean. So that's what it's going to be, and then in that video, just let me know in MMPR and Zyuranger, like what you'd want to see more or less of. Like maybe I spent too much time talking about why the storyline was different in MMPR and you don't want to hear about that. So that way, the first few will kind of be a test run. So I'm going to basically go in chronological order, but there's gaps in what I've seen. Like I've seen Zyuranger and Dairanger, but I've not seen all of Kakuranger, so I have to wait till I finish that. So it might go like from MMPR Season 2, Dairanger video to Mega Ranger and In Space. So that's what that will be. Like I said, leave me feedback in the future, and you can even leave it on this video a bit, but the next one will be a much more good example of like what the videos would be like. And I'm not sure how much visual aids and that stuff I have. I might have some pictures popping up, and not maybe in this one, maybe in this one, but probably in the future ones. But for this one, outside of the introduction to the series, I just kind of wanted to give like a blanket, like sort of prototype or prequel or episode 0 of this show, of just in general, Power Rangers versus Super Sentai. And for most fans, at least a decent chunk of the Western Toku fandom, I guess, they found Power Rangers first. You know, you watched it when you were younger, whatever the series, and then you find the internet, you find it's by Sentai, and that's how you find Sentai. Of course, there are some people that, you know, knew about Sentai before or watched it before, but that's the majority, and of course I'm of the majority. I watched MMPR since I was little, and that led me to Sentai eventually. I don't remember what year it was probably somewhere between Lightspeed Rescue and I would say Wild Force that I realized it was Japanese footage, but it wasn't really around until I got back into it around Dino Thunder that I found out the exact name and stuff, and really got into it, or finding out about it. And then my first Sentai series was actually Geki Ranger, and that was super exciting for me because especially back then when it was much more concise, like the series we are doing now for Power Rangers was last year's. And so it was really exciting for me because at that point I had just been seeing like, here's the Sentai suits you're gonna see next year for Power Rangers. I'm like, oh cool, like SPD looks like it's gonna be fun. But this was neat to see the suits, and then actually, there was just this newness and excitement to seeing the new suits in action and actually getting to see a full series about it. It felt like I was watching something early in a way, watching Geki Ranger while Overdrive was airing. And so that was my first series, and then from there I caught up on it. I've been watching live since Geki Ranger, and then I've caught up on it. I haven't fully caught up, there's a lot, and I'm not even sure how much pre-Jetman I'll ever touch. But yeah, it's an interesting experience, and it's interesting, it's hard to compare the two too, because I like to talk about it for something like this, but it can get really hostile and obnoxious, to be honest, especially from Sentai purist perspective. I don't see too many Power Rangers purists, to be honest. I'll jokingly say that I am, in certain instances, like a reverse purist on certain things, like with names or something like that. That's more like a Digimon thing, where like I refuse to watch the subs for Adventure because I like the American voices. So like I said, I'll be like hashtag reverse purist. So I'll jokingly say that about PR stuff, but like I can't ever think of a situation where I was really mad, like, oh, screw you Sentai, you're not Power Rangers. But the most hostility I see for that is from the Sentai side, and it's like, oh, you're not as much as the original Japanese amazing storytelling because they have blood and mature. And it's like really annoying stuff, and like, oh, you destroyed it and you ruined Gokaiger. It's like, you can't ruin it. Like, people act like when a Power Rangers series is made, like Super Mega Force, when it was made, it like went through Gokaiger's timeline and erased it, and like all of their faces were now replaced by the American actors, and it was deleted, your memories of it are gone. People are way too overdramatic. It can't ruin another show, especially when, even in the series that are more so following Sentai closely, it's supposed to be an entirely different show. You know, we're not making Gokaiger with American actors. Or even closer ones, like we're not making Time Ranger with American actors, we're making Power Rangers Time Force. And it's hard to remember that in ones that are closer together, but it's a hard topic to talk about, I guess I'm trying to say, because people do get so heated, and I just don't like Sentai purists. I think they're kind of one of the worst parts of the fandom, because especially the ones that, you know, like me, found it through PR and now are acting like it's trash. But I think the core difference of the two series is in a lot of the feel of it. It's weird because they both have a similar underlying feel, but also a separate underlying feel, if that makes any sense. And I think the main thing is that Power Rangers was supposed to be, or it started as, like a shared universe, whereas Sentai, for the most part, until recently, was supposed to be separate universes. Like, it usually operated, I'm honestly not too sure about the super early stuff, but for the most part they settled on every series is its own year, we have creative freedom, we can set it in the future, we can write these events in without it contradicting events the previous writer of the series made. So that worked. And then they had like the team up verse, and like back for a while, that even in the movies they used to say two teams that should never have met. And so it was kind of like this self-contained world where they all kind of coexisted, and you kind of ignored or fudged some details that would contradict each other. And like that worked, because it was like, oh, we just get the once annual team up, and then they have creative freedom throughout the year. We didn't really get too many cameos. We would occasionally have other actors come in that played in Toku before, whether it was Sentai or writer, and be playing a new character and stuff like that. But it was all largely separate outside the team-ups until Gokaiger, when that basically took place in that team-up verse. And after that, things sort of blurred, and we've been trying to do a sort of shared universe, but and it's weird to say like PR did it less messy, because it's certainly not without being messy and continuity errors, but it just felt more purposeful, you know. It's weird to think about from a Japanese fans' perspective that the Zyuranger footage through Mega Ranger footage is all one continuous storyline, for better or worse. And things like us using the different Zords, like, you know, we used the Zyuranger suits plus Kiba Ranger for years, and then used Zords from different versions of that, and like as a result, in my head it makes sense that like Dairanger and Kaku Ranger's mecha belong to the Zyuranger suits. And it makes sense in my head that the Shogun Zord comes second, even though in Kaku Ranger they were switched. So it created this very interesting way of thinking. It's like, even though I know the way it's supposed to be, it's almost like two parallel lines of thought. And so Power Rangers did operate very differently. They weren't just doing self-contained, they were creating a larger universe. Even after we separated off into our owns, we also had our team-ups, which were a bit easier because they're all in the same universe. We had little nods, cameos, less as it went by. Of course, we had RPM, which was in an alternate universe, and now we're in a really messy situation. It's kind of funny that both franchises are kind of in a mess in terms of that, because Dino Charge, they never really said whether it was in its own universe or not, and Ninja Steel very well could have been a part of that, but now there's going to be cameos. So I don't know, the point is they're both kind of in a mess right now, so it's hard to compare the state of the shared universe of both right now. But after Gokaiger, the line sort of blurred for both Sentai and Kamen Rider to this weird state of where it will be connected when they want it to, and then not when they don't. And that's kind of annoying and messy. So the point of that long ramble is as a result, ignoring recent years of PRs always did feel more purposeful and meaningful, and I think that's one thing that separates from Sentai. I'm not saying that Sentai doesn't mean meaningful, but I mean the legacy aspect, which is why I'm talking about this, because I think this is the core difference for me, is that because Power Rangers has been going so long, and the universes were connected for so long, it sort of created this inherent fable of the Power Rangers and this legend, even though you get series where they're like, what the Power Ranger? Like, I've never heard of that. But like, for the bulk of the series, it sort of became like this thing, like a Superman or a Batman, in terms of like everybody knows what that is. So when you would have anniversaries or mentions, or like stuff like RJ saying I got it from the morphing grid and stuff like that, it's like it had this feel of legacy, that being a Power Ranger meant something. And I'm not saying that as a knock to Sentai, like it doesn't, because there's heroic moments where it means something. And Gokaiger in particular tried to play on that legacy of the Super Sentai legacy, and it didn't do it unsuccessfully. It just, maybe it's just my personal views, but it didn't hit as hard as if it would have been Power Rangers doing that, because they are supposed to be so separate. It wasn't until Gokaiger that we would get moments like that where it was mentioned that Super Sentai have always been known, because it's usually only mentioned in stuff like Gokaiger, team-up movies, or various moments in Ninja or Zyuohger when they decided to cross over and whatnot. They'll mention the legacy of Super Sentai. And I think a decent chunk of that I'm missing out on is like, for the people that grew up with Sentai in Japan, they probably do feel that legacy, and I think that's the part that does work on me, is that, you know, in Japan they can remember, and even me, I can remember 10 plus years of Sentais now, so there's that sort of emotional weight of this has been around forever. But in universe it just didn't have as much weight, because the universes were supposed to be so separate, and even now when they're connected, you only really get mentions when the team or the person shows up, so you never really feel this, we're the next team of Sentai and this great legacy as you do with Power Rangers. And I think that's one thing that they have over them, for me personally, which makes it special. I did a whole video on that called What Makes Power Rangers Special. But it's interesting, there's a lot of similarities and differences. Obviously the core formula is very similar because they're using the footage from Japan. Sentai always gets 45 plus episodes roughly, because Japan kind of runs, it's a year cycle, you know, you run all year long, an episode almost every week, then next. And here we've gone from tons of episodes in MMPR to settling somewhere around 32, 40, downgrading over time. And then now it's 2 20-episode seasons. So that's kind of been a different way of storytelling. And I think it as a result, some of the later seasons of ours I felt were more concise because we had a smaller episode order, and Sentai has a lot to fill out. Both of them are known for a lot more filler. I think Sentai, for me, Sentai filler gets on my nerves a little bit more because some of the humor doesn't land, but some of the humor in PR recently hasn't landed, and the humor will obviously be different in that as well. And I mentioned at the beginning with the purists, Sentai can get away with more. That is true. They can show more blood sometimes. They can get away with more disturbing concepts. Not so much recently they've taken advantage of that, but that's why you can get this sort of thing about Sentai being more mature. And from a certain point of view, that's true. But I just don't like that being used as this Power Ranger season's bad because they didn't have dark and mature content. It's all about the differences in the culture, and a lot of it now is Saban's own kid gloves, because some of the stuff I've seen kids shows get away with on air now, like PR's not trying, they're playing with their own set of kid gloves now, so that's a whole other matter. But they can get away with more, and as a result there are some more in-depth stories, but I think in some cases Power Rangers had more in-depth stories, and you'll get cases where we'll follow a storyline very closely but we'll change one detail that I prefer. You have seasons that are vastly different, like RPM and Go Onger. Go Onger was a much more lighter comedic series. We made RPM into one of the more serious affairs of Power Rangers. Not that it was totally dark and gritty, but we had a much more heavy plot than Go Onger did. So that's going to be an interesting one to compare because they are so different. And you could say, like with that one, I'll talk about it a little bit here, is that objectively just based on a TV show basis, not thinking about Rangers and Toku, I think RPM was a better done TV show. But they're so different, it's hard to compare them both as trying to do the same thing content-wise. Whereas something like Time Force stuck, Time Force and Wild Force for that matter, stuck very close to their counterparts. So that'll be interesting to compare, to see some of the things they did similar and different. Because in certain cases there's things that I preferred that they did in Sentai, and in others I think PR actually made a change that made it more interesting. So it's interesting that throughout the years we've kind of had ones that are drastically different, where we didn't care about what they did and we wanted to do our own thing and just tried to make the footage work. And then there are other years where we to varying degrees, followed their blueprint. So there can be a lot of similarities in it. And at the core, there's a lot that's the same about it in terms of what you might enjoy and the values of it and the messages. They both will have very cheesy messages. Sentai's often come off as a little bit more cheesy to me, except for nowadays. Nowadays it's beating you over the head with it with the new Saban stuff. But just because I think some of the sentiments don't translate as well, like protecting smiles always seems like a weird one. So, but there is a lot similar. A lot of it's just about overcoming snobbery. I mean, I honestly love both, and depending on my mood, I'll be more into one than the other. I'll be like more in a mood to watch Sentai or be into Sentai, or more in the mood to be about PR. I think for me, at the end of the day, I prefer PR just a little bit. Like I said, not so much recently. If I had to do a direct comparison right now based on the last 2-3 years for both, I'd probably say Sentai. They've been doing some better stuff than Power Rangers and hold my attention more. And but it's harder now to say. But in terms of just overall, that shared universe and that legacy feel and some of the character decisions made just kind of make it feel more special, and it's probably a bit of nostalgia in there, but that doesn't mean I think Sentai is way lesser. It's just kind of a personal thing. It'll be interesting to see, especially the way things are going right now for both of them, to how that changes throughout the years. I don't think I can't see me being like, oh, nope, it's Sentai now forever, but I can see it flopping right now. Like I said, overall it's PR, but right now I would say Sentai. But yeah, that was just kind of a blanket ramble comparison, talking about some of the concepts and differences. Like I said, the next video will be G-Ranger and MMPR, and I'll sort of talk about loosely, sort of like the characters, some of the episodes they might have copied, the plot differences, all that kind of stuff. Like I said at the end, which one I prefer. And in that one, it'll be kind of important to get feedback about what you'd want to see more or less of, because it's basically going to be a test run. And these aren't really scripted. Like even this one was very, like all my videos, I don't really have a script or anything like that. I just kind of go with what I feel. But with those, I'll like think about, these are the points I want to hit, and then try to hit them. But it's not going to be a super pre-planned, because that's just kind of my style. I think that pre-planning what I'm going to say and just kind of makes it feel unnatural, and I like for what I'm saying to you guys to feel like this is me and not, oh, I planned this out 5 years in advance. Like, this is what I'm feeling in the moment. So yeah, so let me know on that one. I'm not sure how long after this video the Sentai or the G-Ranger MMPR one will come out, but it will be within less than a month for sure. And this also doesn't mean the top 5s are going away or anything like that. I'm still doing top 5s. I have several in the works right now. Several that have actually been requested that I didn't think I was going to do. But anyway, thanks for listening to this long ramble. Hope you enjoyed this. Hope you are looking forward to the next series. Until next time, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Dosm Rider, signing out.